Okay, thanks very much. It's 4 o'clock. Dave Redrawell will take his usual position before launching into the series of statements and questions. Okay, it's all good though. Okay, welcome to everyone today, Cabinet, councillors, members of the public. As usual, the agenda papers and public forum submissions are all available on our council website. I need to draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure, which is on the agenda and currently being displayed on the screen. It's a reminder that the webcast is, this meeting is being webcast, so can I ask everyone, please speak into the microphone to make sure you can be heard by those listening at home. Just in relation to today's agenda, agenda item 12 contains an exempt appendix with commercially sensitive information. So any discussion on the content of this appendix will need to be held in exempt session. Cabinet members have been given access to this appendix to read through. Agenda item 2 is public forum. Statements and questions will be taken at the time of the relevant items discussion, and I will reply myself, or I'll give the floor to the relevant cabinet member to give the response. Agenda item 3, apologies for absence. We have no absences, but we do have apologies from councillors Asher Craig and Craig Cheney. You'll need to leave early. So we've changed the ordering of today's agenda to accommodate. So that means we'll be taking items 22 to 26 first, and then 16, 17 and 18 before returning to the original order. So thank you all for bearing with us, but these changes do allow cabinet members to keep to wider commitments as well. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Kai?
Yeah, thanks. I have to declare an interest for the Southmead Regeneration item. I'm a trustee of Southmead Development Trust, so I'll be stepping out for that item on the advice of Tim O'Gara. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kai. Agenda item 5, matters referred for consideration by scrutiny or full council. There are no referrals from scrutiny or full council on this occasion. Agenda item 6, reports from scrutiny commissions. There are no reports from scrutiny commission. Agenda item 7, chair's business. I'm just going to share a few items today. First off, my attendance at UK REEF, which is the UK's Real Estate Investment and Infrastructure Forum, which is in Leeds, and this year it was on the 16th and 17th of May. Now that doesn't sound particularly spectacular, you know, as an event, but it is the event where major investors, public and private, obviously including our own government, organisations like Homes England and Department for Transport, those infrastructure investors are there, we are there, both as Bristol, as the West of England, but also as the Western Gateway, and I had some roles there as chair of UK Core Cities as well. And I think it was a very encouraging event. You know, one of my least favourite phrases in politics, which is used by one group in particular, is all it takes is political will. The point we make repeatedly is it takes political will and billions of pounds to deliver for a city. Slogans, T-shirts and banners have a role and an important role, but at some point you need some project managers, an Excel sheet and delivery to get homes built, to get bridges built, to get transport infrastructure put in place, to get flood defences put in place, and that all take and heat networks, so I should add to that, and that all takes investment. So being at UK REEF was very encouraging. There's a great deal of excitement about Bristol. It's worth me sharing because it will be an issue. There is a concern about the model of political governance that is coming our way. Serious investors want to know who they're dealing with, and when they shake a hand, they want to know that there's going to be some stability in a world of instability. And our new political arrangements were raised several times, not just by private sector investors, but by government agencies as well, and their ability, willingness to work with us in the future. But nonetheless, our aim over the next year will be to build on the investments we have secured, not least Temple Quarter, to make sure that we are still at the forefront of investors' minds, public and private, so that we can get the things done that need to get done in Bristol to make sure that we're keeping up to pace with the needs of a growing population in the context of a climate and ecological emergencies, as well. So that is going to be a big challenge as we really think through the transition. Secondly, in line with that, on the 26th of May, we had the groundbreaking for the new university campus, which is going to be a £500 million development over, obviously, in Temple Quarter. That aligned to the near £100 million we got for Temple Mead, which is going ahead now, which will mean the opening up of the eastern entrance at the same time as the development of the new campus, with the £350 million LNG development on Temple Island, is part of not only unlocking a once-in-a-generation opportunity for regeneration in the centre of Bristol, but part of building the development, the investment momentum that I think the city's going to need, especially over the next 3-4 years, as investors do look very carefully at where they put their money and who they're able to work with. So it was a really strong event. I did share with the university team. I remember being on site just a few years ago when we went to initiate the tearing down of the old postal office sorting site. And we do take these things for granted. That was an eyesore in the city for over 20 years. And at last we got it taken down. I did share how disappointed I was on that occasion, because I was told I was going to be pushing the button to take that building down. I thought it was going to be an explosion, but it wasn't. It was a crane grabber that basically tore the building down brick by brick. So it was a push the button, a 30-second delay while the grabber made its way to the building and slowly began to pull it down. It wasn't as exciting as I thought it would have been, but I should have worked out that you can't have explosions next to train stations. The two things don't go together. So it was going to be a little bit more understated. But nonetheless, it is going ahead. There's a lot of excitement, and it's good for the city. I also want to share as well that on the 28th of May, I went to the Trojan Education Centre in St Jude's, where an event was being held by members of the Sudanese Association of Bristol and friends. The Lord Mayor was there, Peaches Golden was there, the High Sheriff, and Lord Lieutenant, and it was a very sobering event. And it's one just to really emphasise again that issues that are often on the news as foreign affairs or things that are happening over there are of first order concern to people living in Bristol. An international city, as we are, means that what happens in Sudan is happening to people's brothers, sisters, cousins, aunts, uncles, parents, grandparents. And one of the young people that spoke there incredibly powerfully was actually in Sudan when the violence broke out. A young woman, one of our youth councillors under the age of 20, got out the country but left her father behind as well, who's there looking after his parents in the middle of all that violence. So as she goes to sleep at night, she is thinking about her father in harm's way and her grandparents in harm's way. It's important that we remember that these are local issues. International issues are local issues. I just also want to take the opportunity to make the point that there's a standard been set around the way we treat migrants. And it's been set by the way we've responded to European migrants. And I think it's important to recognise that it's felt that there is not just a two-tier, but a multi-tier system that people fleeing persecution, conflict, and increasingly in the future will be fleeing climate change, around which there'll be no legal framework as it stands at the moment. Make sure that they get the same level of humanisation, welcome, as we have in Europe have offered to European people from European countries, mainly Ukraine, seeking safety. It's about levelling up, if I dare use that phrase, the quality of our conversation and attitude towards people looking for safety, but not allowing a fragmentation and a multi-tiered approach in which some people are deemed more human and more worthy of compassion, be it overtly or covertly, than others. And I shared that on the night, and there was acknowledgement in the room that that is the feeling. So it's important that we as a City of Sanctuary take that stand. Two final things on that. One is Carnival is coming up, St. Paul's Carnival. I can't get out of calling it St. Paul's Festival, but anyway, it's the first Saturday in July. And at this moment in time, people all over the country are recognising Windrush as well. On the June the 22nd, the anniversary. And so again, as a city, this is a key part of Bristol's history. And finally, to say thank you very much. Andrea Dell is not in here, has been director of the Bristol One City office. I think of all the things we've done around city leadership in Bristol, the development of the One City approach in the city office is one of the most significant. To pull together the chief execs, the vice chancellors, the head of the courts. We will now be joined by the head of Bristol Prison, the Hallfield Prison, our schools, our unions, to have a regular framework by which the leaders of all those institutions connect, understand their interdependencies, and rally around shared objectives for Bristol, I think is one of the most important pieces of coordination that we've done in Bristol. It doesn't come with flags and, champion tweets and all the rest of it. It's about saying there are millions of pounds being spent in multiple sources of Bristol, multiple places in Bristol, and if we can get that spend into alignment, we increase the chances of getting good outcomes for the people of Bristol, particularly where issues such as mental health cross issues from employment to housing to whatever start we get children in life to school provision and all the rest of it. And Andrea has led that work incredibly well, and we just want to put on record our thanks to her for that as she takes some time to think about the next chapter in her life. So thank you, Andrea. Okay, so let's move on to the first of our items now. Craig, we changed the order, so you're coming first with agenda item 22, temporary accommodation project, funding and planning strategy.
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. Thanks for accommodating my, I need to leave, unfortunately. The next four papers cover 4 transformation programmes that are being set up in response to the Council's financial challenge. All 4 have significant savings targets that are critical to ensuring a balanced budget and sustainable services. Each are seeking to have their own funding allocated to pay for the capacity and expertise needed to deliver at the pace required. But we are also seeking approval for additional transformation partnership support to sit across these to ensure join up and delivery assurance. There is a national increase in the demand for temporary accommodation. In Bristol, the annual temporary accommodation subsidy loss for this year is estimated at 11.1 million, generating an ongoing budget pressure for the council of 5 million, with a risk that demand will increase. This paper seeks approval to allocate funds and resources to support delivery of the temporary accommodation project and seeks approval for the recommissioning of the emergency accommodation framework. The project will significantly reduce the housing benefit subsidy loss, which is the main cost to the council from temporary accommodation. And it will do this by providing more council-owned accommodation and by increasing the amount of supported exempt accommodation available. We are setting up a new supported accommodation procurement framework which will attract more registered providers to bring forward supported accommodation. We will also bring forward plans for accelerated housing delivery and conversions of empty properties that are on the council's disposal list. In the meantime, as demand for TA grows, we will still need to use some privately rented accommodation as temporary accommodation, though we expect to use less of this year on year as our project delivers. To ensure that we maintain a supply of TA as well as controlling costs, the Council is recommissioning its emergency accommodation framework, which is due to expire in 2024.
Thank you, Craig. An issue of huge significance to Bristol, over 1,000 families in temporary accommodation, or households, I should say, temporary accommodation at the moment, which is a cost to them, but also a great financial challenge for the city. Nonetheless, we've had no public forum statements and no questions on this item. Can I ask any other Cabinet members you'd like to come in here? Tom?
Just say I fully endorse the approach being taken. It's a hugely challenging area for us because obviously it's trying to kind of work out what the demand's going to be, is literally like kind of you sort of sticking your finger in the air, and so all these steps we will take are going to be really good ones, and we'll obviously have to kind of keep an eye on how those pressures emerge. The use of TA nationally is over 100,000 households. It's the highest it's been, I think, in a very long time, if ever, and has significantly increased over the last 13 years since the Tories have been in power nationally. And so it's a pressure everywhere. It needs government reform around the Renters Reform Bill. We need to scrap Section 21 no-fault evictions. So much more we need to do to make sure then we're, yet again, not just dealing with the symptoms of a problem and trying to kind of keep on top of that. So I think, this is some really good stuff that we're going to be doing, and just hope we can kind of contain the challenges and do what we can to give residents better outcomes.
Thanks, Tom. And I know this has taken up, a huge amount of our bandwidth in the local authority as well to trying to get a hold of the challenges you said, but get upstream of it as well, not just in our own boundaries, but influencing what happens at the national level. If there are no others, let me hand back to you now, Craig, for final comments and to take the decision, which I support, and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Hopefully we'll get a bit more conversation around that in the future. But okay, agenda item 23, property programme funding and emerging plans. Is with you as well, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. This paper seeks approval to allocate funds and resources to support delivery of several projects within the newly defined property programme to ensure that we realise the 3.2 million of revenue savings and 36 million of capital receipts that were built into the budget for this year. It will include a review of the estates to ensure that we are retaining the correct property assets for the right uses, while selling properties to contribute to the revenue savings and capital receipt targets. Properties that we do not need or make a sufficient financial yield will be released. The programme will also rationalise our office estate further, which we will do by moving staff from our Temple Street office into City Hall. We will also refurbish space, enabling this to be released for a commercial lease. We will also refurbish 3 locality offices, enabling more staff to move into these, allowing vacated offices to be released for disposal. Alongside this work, we will implement the corporate landlord function, including changes to internal processes and property governance, centralisation of remaining property budgets, and improvements to our asset management solution. Together, these changes will enable better management of assets across the estate. This work will also include developing a centralised one council approach to our cafe and catering contracts, including tendering for an associated partner.
Thank you, Craig. We've had no public forums and statements on this, but if I can just acknowledge the work you and the property team have done to get your heads around just what is out there in our estate, because it was quite chaotic until we actually began to put some order in to record things, and actually for Stephen as well, and everything that's been done, so thank you for that. I just want to offer it up to any cabinet members who want to come in on this. It's mainly about estate management, so Craig, let me hand back to you now to take the decision, which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. And it is no mean feat, and also we should, recognise those staff that are moving offices from one to another. It's not always an easy thing to do, but of course, having buildings that are partially occupied whilst we're in a financially difficult position is not really justifiable. So there is a firm logic behind it. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you, Craig. Agenda item 24 is with you as well. Our families programme, children and educational transformation. I hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Children and education services are operating in a complex and challenging environment, balancing the tension between delivering essential improvements and savings delivery. The paper seeks approval to allocate funds for our families programme, children education, of 1.744 million for the critical capacity, expertise and investment needed to deliver essential improvements at pace. This will ensure we work within our financial boundaries through a more strategic approach in our commissioning and delivery model. The paper outlines the programme's dedicated schools grant and general fund revenue savings and helps mitigate against future pressures due to increasing demand. The Our Families programme brings together all change activity across children and families, safer communities, education and skills. This includes work currently underway, which will be restructured into the programme to ensure strategic alignment and a single view of the improvements, savings, quality assurance, compliance risks and issues. Urgent improvements are required now and in the long term to secure better value for money through a balanced budget by addressing the drivers for spend increases. This will future-proof the service against increasing demand and strengthen the current model to enable delivery of a children, young persons and family-centred approach. Some of the key objectives of the transformation programme include improving outcomes for children and young people, increasing partnership working with families, schools and key stakeholders, introducing innovative approaches to service delivery and managing demand, improving efficiency and value for money, and addressing inequalities in service provision. The programme ensures the wise use of resources on those things that will deliver the best outcomes for our children, young people and families in Bristol in alignment with the corporate strategy and belonging strategy.
Thank you, Craig. Again, an area of key importance, but nonetheless no public forum statements and no questions on this. Can I just offer it to any Cabinet members? Asha.
Okay. So firstly, I'd like to thank the team that has put together, that has worked incredibly hard to get us where we are, have worked at pace on this. I think I've made it clear that we needed to transform the service, and in doing so, we're tackling, we want to get rid of the kind of siloed also approach to the way that many services can operate. So I'm really pleased that we have reached this marker. We've got this programme in front of you, and we'll now be able to kind of deliver at pace the changes, because as Craig has pointed out, the challenges are great, but we have a plan and a way through. And I would also say that having had our kind of recent Ofsted inspection also gave us even more of an impetus to, kind of level, give us a platform to lift off of. So I'm really pleased that this is in front of you today, and look forward to you approving the report. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Asha. If there's nothing from anyone else, let me hand back to you, Craig, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decisions to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
And we're going to stay with you for agenda item 25, Craig, the Adult Social Care Transformation Programme funding and emerging plans.
Thank you. This report seeks approval to allocate funds towards the Adult Social Care Transformation Programme of 2.4 million, of which 1.142 is specifically earmarked and 1.258 is new and requested from the corporately held resource. Bristol's transformational approach will shift emphasis in adult social care and broader health services. Activity, service capacity, resources and system workflows will be shifted from high-level, institutional and bed-based services to concentrate on community-based, personalised services. This will make the most of people's strengths and capabilities and empower communities and individuals to look after themselves and each other as best they can. The Adult Social Care Transformation Programme has been underway for 2 years. Some improvements to systems and activities have been made in this time, but the need to make the cost efficiencies means we must deliver at greater scale and with an increased pace. Due to this need, the programme is being reset and significant additional resourcing is being proposed to enable this work to progress. The programme will review, develop and transform the way we work to maximise the use of resources to achieve outcomes for those who draw on adult social care services. Work streams have been designed to coordinate the activities necessary across adult social care and with partners to jointly implement the transformation programme objectives. Given the significant scale of the financial and improvement challenge, the Council will procure a delivery partner to provide additional delivery capacity, increase confidence in the delivery of plans in progress and identify evidence, and then deliver additional opportunities to achieve the planned in-year savings.
Thank you. And we have our first public forum statement and questions now. So the statement is from Bristol Reclaiming Independent Living, Christina Biggs. So Christina, you have 1 minute. Thank you. Are you okay? Is that... Is it not this, Christina? Okay, no problem. Okay, we'll hold that and we'll find out where your statement was for today. So let's go to questions. We've had 2 public forum questions from Councillor Tim Y. Tim?
Thanks, Marvin. This is just a question that I'm bringing after talking to disabled groups and disabled people, and it's about the fair and affordable care policy. Apologies for the typo in the question. It's obviously causing concern amongst disabled people. I've been talking to people, whilst they understand the cost pressures in the council and would support some of this, also realising it is a legal part of the Care Act. They're concerned for 3 reasons, really. One, about the level of co-production that's gone into this, and particularly about some of the consequences of the policy. 2, particularly around if it's people feel pressurised to move into residential care, although thank you for the reassurances, Helen, that that's not the case. But that leads on to the second point, which is about how it will be monitored. So they'd like some reassurance about how if that does come to pass, we'll know about it and they can be involved with reviewing the question. And thirdly, there's still a lack of an appeal system about if people do feel pressurised into moving into residential care, and people would really like to see that. So my question's really twofold. It's about what assurance we can give to people about these matters will be covered in the consultation, and how can we build service user consultation into future review.
Thanks, Tim, and it's good to be able to have the opportunity to say the answers to this in public, because we've been talking about it, as you know, and we've been talking about it with the disability groups. And I'm glad you also corrected that it's the fair and affordable policy, not the fair access to care policy. I mean, in effect, well, first of all, I'll just say something about the context of the report, because Bristol is not alone, is it, in adult social care and children is taking an increasingly large part of our budget up. And if you look at the profile of users of our services, whereas certainly I think even when I first had the portfolio, the largest majority were in the older people bracket. Now it's tipped and it's about adults of working age. So you've got to think, well, we're going to be looking after those people longer. That's a great thing, but we've also got to do the right thing for them so that their quality of life is better. And I think one of the things about the policy is that, and in good faith, a very early draft of it was shared with some of the groups so that they could influence the shape of it, and I think that they're much happier with it now. And it's also given us some lessons around further co-production, and Alan Davis, the chair of the Disability Equality Commission, is doing that work with us and came to talk to the Health and Wellbeing Board about how that's going recently. So this is more about person-centred care and giving each person what is best for them within the range of affordability, obviously. The example about somebody being put into residential care from a very expensive support package within their home situation, you know this as well as I do, that is extremely unlikely that residential care would be less expensive than that package. So, but it has to be in there as an example. And also, this policy is actually what we do now, but it's not written down in one place. So the consultation is open now. The earlier draft wasn't perfect, but that, it was unfortunate because it was shared with them in a trusting way, and it got out there. So it did raise people's concerns. But the Disability Equality Forum and the Adult Social Care Disability Equalities Forum and the Disability Commission are both looking at that. And although we haven't said about an appeal system, I mean, it depends what comes back in the consultation. That might come back very loud and clear in the consultation. But each individual will be able to negotiate what their package is, and it is very much about individual support.
Did you have a follow-up to that, Tim?
Not so much the question, just I think when I've talked to people, it's very much, if this is about maximising the use of assistive technology, for example, people are kind of fine with that and they understand it. It is for that very, very rare potential that they're worried about people being forced into residential care. And we've had discussions, and I know that's not the intention, but it is allowed under the policy, so it's about just providing some assurance and some monitoring around that. It's got quite a lot of national interest as well, as you know, from disability groups. So that was the plea, really.
Yeah, and I can't say clearly enough that residential care is for many people the least preferred option, and it's not just assistive technology, but it's also about community support, isn't it? It's the kind of thing that VCS groups are doing across a whole range of conditions that people might have, and being able to use that support, making communities more welcoming. I mean, we're going to hear about the work that goes on in Southmead later, and that's a fantastic example of where people are able to keep people with learning disabilities, dementia, keep them safe within their community. So I can't see that. I hope I'm not proved wrong, but I can't see that example will happen in real life.
Okay, Tim, I was a bit relaxed there because the first question had quite a long preamble, and then your second question, what the question is a statement, but that's all good. We let that go. I will be a bit stricter as we go on. But you did have a second question. Has that been covered, or did you want to? You've done it, Tim? Okay, fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, Tim. Can I offer the floor to any other Cabinet members? No, just for me to thank you, Helen, for your leadership on this.
Can I just come back on one small point, which Craig sort of covered, but I just think, we need to be very clear that because people are very stretched, caseloads are high with social workers, that although the transformation programme we've been doing under our own steam, we do need that additional support to be able to give the headroom for people to do the transformational activities and for it to become sort of business as usual.
I think we've mentioned it a few times, but this is some of the hidden cost of austerity, isn't it? So it's easy to get leaflet material by campaigning for a park, a toilet, or a library, but what we don't get is campaigns for the backroom staff, the project managers, the lawyers, the accountants, that actually keep the machinery of the local authority, run the HR processes, do the recruitment, make sure the IT is in place, that keep that backroom capacity that's been hollowed out, which is obviously some, Craig, that's really in your brief as well. Interestingly, at UK Reef, it was one of the things we were talking about. One of the challenges around housing delivery is about that backroom capacity, but also as well here, Helen, keeping systems working and hollowing out. And I did share with one national, with a minister, it costs money to save money. Right? You've got to put the money at the front end to get people to redesign, reconfigure services, run consultations. That doesn't just happen without a cost at the front end. So it's one of those kind of invisible challenges that we've had to take on as an authority. But having said that, if there are no other comments, let me hand back to you, Craig, for any final comments and to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Yeah, thanks. Well, actually, between you, you've taken what I was going to say at the end, so I won't make any more comments other than to say, in terms of decisions to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
If you were going to say it, it must have been okay. Yeah. Okay, agenda item 26. This is still with you, Craig. The financial update report, June 2023. Yeah,
this will be a really quick one. Period 1 is not part of the financial monitoring calendar, so there aren't any changes to the position yet. The first formal reporting month of 23-24 will be at the close of May, which is period 2. This report does, however, request that Cabinet notes the urgent key decision that the City Leap client function team submit 3 applications to the Low Carbon Skills Fund Phase 4, which they did on the 26th of April, totalling 890,000. Beyond that, I've nothing to add.
Thank you, Craig. No public forum statements or questions. If no other Cabinet member want to come in on this item, let me hand back to you to take the decision, which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. I'm going to head off now. Apologies.
No, thank you very much. Take care. Okay, on to agenda item 16, Children's Care and Support Services Framework. And this is with you, Asha.
Thank you. The paper approves the tender and award of a Children's Care and Support Services Framework. This is to provide specialist, often nurse-led support and care for children with complex needs and behaviours, where existing contractual arrangements are unable to do so. In the past year, the Council has experienced high demand for these urgent and specialist services, which includes support delivered in the home, in care placements and in short break services for disabled children. These services support in stabilising the home environment or placement for the child in both the short and long term. Without these services, these children would be at risk of entering care, suffering a placement breakdown, or being admitted into mental health facilities. In procuring this framework, we will be able to meet the need of children while reducing the level of risk involved in this area of the Council's spend through improved monitoring and quality assurance. This should also increase value for money through a more strategic approach to spend. Thank you.
Okay, so Care and Support Services Framework for Children. We've had no public forum statements and no questions on this item. Any Cabinet members wish to come in here? Well, this is an area that's coming under, incredible pressure, as you say, Asher. I was actually at an LGA Labour leaders session on Saturday in a room of over 60 local government leaders, and it was interesting. The number that mentioned children's services, the increase in demand, the increase in costs of providing services to those in need, shows it's a very prominent national issue that needs a local solution, but obviously needs a national solution to it as well. So thank you, and Rena and Abby, for your leadership on this. Let me hand back to you now to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you, Asher. On to agenda item 17, Ofsted Improvement Plan 23-25. This is you again.
So following Ofsted's inspection in January, we were required to provide an action plan that responds to inspection findings by the 23rd of June. This Children's Services Improvement Plan has been drafted to respond to identified improvement priorities from the inspection, as well as the transformation programme for children and education that we just heard about from Craig. Although we will be submitting a finalised improvement plan to Ofsted later this month, activity is already underway to address key areas of improvement. We're embedding practice developments in how we oversee children in unregulated placements and private fostering arrangements. We're improving joint processes with health to secure more timely provision of initial health assessments for children in care. We're progressing DFE funding for children's homes for children with complex needs and strengthening governance to prioritise care leavers within local authority housing pathways. This report gives assurance that the plan responds effectively to areas for improvement raised by Ofsted and other key priorities for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Asher. Again, Children's Services, but no public forum statements and no questions on this subject. Any Cabinet members wish to comment on this item? No, I think it stands incredibly challenging for us. It's important that we get outside eyes on what we do and contribution to our prioritisation and the urgency with which we approach making sure Bristol's a city in which every child, irrespective of background, gets off to the best possible start in life. And thank you for your leadership on it. So let me hand back to you now to take the decision which I support and which will be displayed on the screen.
So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you. And we're staying with you, Asher, for agenda item 18, Send Accelerated Progress Plan.
So this report represents Send Accelerated Improvement Plan, which details how Bristol local area partners aim to address the weakness of a difficult relationship with parents and carers. The plan has been developed with key local area partners and has been informed by feedback from parents and carers. The plan links to the Bristol's belonging in education priorities and underpins Bristol's SEND strategy to support and empower disabled children and young people and those with special educational needs to reach their full potential and have healthy, independent and fulfilling lives. Whilst this plan has been in development, work has been ongoing to improve our relationships with parents and carers and how we co-produce better services for children with SEND. And I've been really pleased by the way in which over the last nearly 18 months now we've been working with the consortium of groups which makes up about 24 parent-led organisations in the city. Bristol parent carers have now also been formally approved by the DFE to provide the parent carer forum function for Bristol and are being adopted with the SEND local area governance accordingly. This will be crucial in supporting and enhancing delivery of the plan, including how we better plan our engagement and co-design with families and improve parents and carers' experiences of our services.
Thank you, Asher. Again, no public forum statements and no questions. Any Cabinet members wish to comment on this item? Okay, thank you very much. Let me hand back to you now, Asher, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Asher. So on to different subject matter now. MetroWest Phase 2 and Ashley Down Rail Association. And this is with you, Don.
Thank you, Marvin. This comes to Cabinet at the same time as Network Rail start an intensive 16-day round-the-clock effort to install 2 new platforms at Ashley Down Station. Working with Network Rail and the West of England Combined Authority, we're delivering Bristol's first new train stations in almost a century. As work on the Ashley Down part of the line continues, we're also working towards delivering 2 new stations on a reopened Henbury line and pushing for stations at St Anne's and Ashton Gate too. This is crucial infrastructure to support homes and help reduce car dependency. Expanding the local rail network through the MetroWest programme will increase both the capacity of the network and the accessibility of our local rail services as we build towards the mass transit system that Bristolians need and deserve. The new station at Ashley Down is part of a wider MetroWest 2 project which will reopen the Henbury line between Bristol Temple Meads to Henbury to passenger traffic. I know that there are concerns about the inconvenience caused by the work, but I think most people understand that these are great developments for the city and will tolerate the construction as these are delivered for Bristol. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. So I know there's concern about the cycle path, so we have had lots of public forum statements and questions on this one. So the first statement is from Rail Future Sevenside, Dave Redswell. David, this is a statement, so I'm going to ask Tim to keep track of a minute, please.
Is delaying spending on the major project of the Henbury Loop line, and we need to do that, and Network Rail talking about this morning, so if we can move that along, we're very grateful. Second issue is about bus rail integration. We are concerned about the design of the bus stops and the interchange at Ashley Down, and we do need to look at that with the West of England Mirror Combined Authority and reposition some of the bus stops so that we're able to get to Southmead Hospital, to Lockleys, to Eastville Centre. We also need to look at the bus subsidies on that route as well, but we do need to make sure there's a hub there, and therefore we'd urge the Bristol Council to talk to the West of England, to Metro Mayor, to make sure that starts to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And obviously there'll be a chance to bring that to the next Combined Authority meeting as well. But obviously we'll take that on. Don, your mic's on still, by the way. So we have another statement now from South Gloucestershire Disability Network.
That's Brendan, but he's not here, he might trying to use a train, so what's going on, but
all right.
It's pretty chaotic trying to use the local train with those lines closed at the moment.
All right, thanks. Hence, we need a mass transit system, right? Thank you very much, Dave. So the next statement is from Gavin Smith. No? Okay. Christina, now we got you in the right place. Thank you. Here we go.
Yes, so this is about what we've been advocating for a while now, which is to integrate bus services with rail services. So we already have a rail network which doesn't cover the whole city, but it doesn't take much thought to realise that if you could coordinate the buses that actually intersect with the railways, then you've suddenly extended your network for very little extra cost. And the irritating thing really is that the positioning of bus stops isn't with the West Midlands Combined Authority yet. I understand there might be moves toward that. So that then creates a difficulty when you're trying to do this, coordinating rail and bus. So as part of our statement, I don't know if they gave the rest of the document. That's going to be, we're going to put that in as a pre-application, pre-app suggestion to the process. But it will require Bristol City Council to sit down with West Midlands Combined Authority. In the case of Ashlydown Station, it's simply that there's 2 bus lines going past Ashlydown, one of which actually goes up to Lockleys. So the new development in Lockleys would very much benefit. So the map should be there, and we've suggested where the stop should go. We understand this is quite difficult for buses, but please can you make this happen? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. I won't respond to every statement, but what I would also say is we've got your statement. It'd be great to get that sent into the Transport Board as well, so we can have that round conversation with our officers, WEC officers, transport experts as well. So thank you for that contribution. Make sure that's in the mix. It might be worth saying as well that when we talk about mass transit system, we're not just talking about one mode of transport. We're not even talking about underground rail, as keeps being misreported. Technology's moved on. We're talking about an integration of multi-modes, right? So a transit system is a collection of different modes, how they interact. At the heart of it is a core offer, but as you say, it's about the integration of, of rail, road, cycling, pedestrians, and whatever that ultimate spine offer would be as well. So thank you for your contribution. Let's get on to our questions now, and the first 2 questions are from James Crawford. Is James here? No. Okay. Okay. The next 2 questions are from Southwest Transport Network and Rail Future Sevenside. Dave Redgewell.
Well, again, I think I was going to ask Brendan to ask these, but again, it's about the points I've made. I think we'd like an answer, really, in a written question to us about when this planning permission for Henbury Station is actually going to be sorted and granted, because it's really going to hold us up with Network Rail. And we had a really good response from the Minister yesterday and the Chair of GB Railways on MetroWest. They were quite pleased with the progress. They weren't so pleased about us on buses, I can assure you, but they were quite pleased about our rail progress in this area. But this is going to delay it, and I just urge again, do we have a date?
It is a question, Dave. Just what is the date?
My question, Marvin, do we have a date for the planning permission?
You will understand, Dave, that I have no dates or access to the deliberations of the planning committee over in South Gloucestershire.
I suppose my supplementary there, Mr. Mayor, would be simply, can we talk to them then, please? South Gloucestershire County Council.
I would just say on that, there is obviously a new administration in South Gloucestershire as well. They'll be getting their heads around things, and I think one of the requests we have made is that we can book in so that they all understand our priorities for the city region, we understand their priorities, and we work out how we work cross-border with and around the combined authority to get those priorities delivered. So I think your point about getting hard dates is one that's well made. The number of papers we send back because they don't refer to specific dates for delivery, I'm sure you wouldn't be too surprised that we do send those back. So we'll do our best to drive in on that, Don. Yeah, over there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is. We have discussions. I met with one of the new transport leads a few days ago. We talk a lot, but this is a planning committee matter, and you'll understand why I cannot intervene on that, because councillors operate as individual councillors on those committees, regulatory committees.
We'll follow up, but obviously it's a challenge because they're not in Bristol. But Dave, did you have you had a second question?
Well, my second question is really about the integration. That is a key point of MetroWest. A light rail, rapid transit system, and MetroWest rail and bus services, but without the integrated hubs and we need to develop one actually down. It's a route to the hospital. It's exactly what North Bristol NHS Trust want. We need to improve the bus services. We've got permission now to put supported service money from BSIP. That's come through on my phone today from the Minister. I can copy that. I've sent it to Don already. So we can get the bus service sorted out, but we need the hub put in place. So we need effectively the bus stops, the shelters, the real-time information. So our buses can pull up outside.
Your question, Dave?
Well, the question
is there going to be a hub?
Are we going to ask the combined authorities to start to make these hubs happen and help design them until our officers here are transferred to the combined authority, which we welcome, of course.
Yep, the combined authority is working on its mobility hubs, although we might be all frustrated about the speed of it. Regarding Muller Road, you'll know that we've got improvement programme for Muller Road, which will involve some changes to Muller Road. And to refer back to Christina's question, it is absolutely recognised by both authorities that there needs to be joined up thinking regarding the bus and train at the station. It's not that that's not happening or no one's talking. It is a matter of sequencing. At some point, something's going to happen first and then something's going to happen second. But we do know that buses do need to meet with trains, and also people need to use various forms of micromobility when leaving and arriving at a station as well.
Do you have a supplementary, Dave, on that second question?
I suppose my supplementary, seeing the work that Kerry McCarthy put in, is Don now aware that we can now use bus service improvement grant for supported bus services, which may help us with these bus links?
I am aware. Thank you.
And that's a conversation to be had within the combined authority as well, because obviously it's a Metro Mayor's choice. I mean, in the middle of all that, I just want to just pick up on one of Don's point, and I'm sure, and I know that the work you and Christina have put in over the years, there is more to be gained from this, but let's not lose sight of the fact that this is new train stations opening up in the city, which I think is an incredible piece of delivery. The first train stations in almost a century in our city. And there are a series of them coming through now, which I think is incredibly positive. They will, in and of themselves, bring a benefit. And I'm glad to see members of some of the opposition nodding away of just how important this station is. I hope that is actually true, the support for them. So they will, in and of themselves, deliver a benefit. Our challenge is to make sure we maximise the benefit they could potentially deliver by that full integration. It's not easy in a city of constrained sites and limited space, but that is the challenge we're trying to take on, and your ongoing pressure and advocacy and ideas on that are, as we say every time, are always welcome, Dave, because you do always turn up with those solutions and those prods. Let's go on to the next statement now. Next question from Tim Rippington. Tim.
Thank you, Mayor. Really welcome the opening of a new railway station very soon at Portway, and accelerating the building of this one. Rail is a really important part of any integrated transport network, and all the major cities have interurban railway networks, as well as the big railway stations. As people here will know, I've been banging on about transport in St Anne's since I first came in, because it is a real desert in terms of public transport. And you'll know that we've had this bid into restoring your railways, which has been waiting for 18 months now for government response. And my gut feeling is that response is not going to be a positive one. So can I ask the Cabinet if they will continue to support the reopening of St Anne's Station via other routes, such as MetroWest, if the Restoring Your Railways bid eventually fails because of the short-sightedness of the current government?
Thanks, Tim. Yes, we certainly do support any bid or campaigners to reopen St Anne's Station, though we recognise that the business case has its challenges. I know you recognise that as well, to be fair. but it would offer a lot. We're looking at our mass transit solution, would have a line going through Brislington as well, which would not be without relevance to St Anne's. And it was good to see you also on the ferry the other day, making your way out to St Anne's as well. And it would be enormously valuable to have that boat. I know it wasn't the fastest trip, maybe, was it, to the centre? But it's the only way of doing it. Yeah, it's the only way of doing it at the moment. It might be faster than that bus service, actually. But anyway, it's an opportunity for some people to get on in a leisurely and manner to the centre of the city. We know that the station will need to have a business case that stands up to secure further funding. And we know also the assessment criteria for business cases do put an enormous emphasis on the benefit-cost ratio, and perhaps the strategic case for them isn't given enough place in that. So we'll continue to work with the new government, we hope, in next year to advocate for the value of this. Do you have any further questions, Tim?
No, just say thank you. My residents of my ward will be pleased to hear that.
Thank you, and continue to meet with WECA, join in with WECA meetings regarding bus services. I think meetings might be overstating it, but to advocate is probably the position I feel that I'm in with respect to WECA for the needs of Brislington, which does need a better bus service, there's no doubt about that. Thank you to you for all the work you do.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, Tim. I mean, I'll just take the opportunity as well to say, Tim, you are a tireless advocate for your ward, and you turn up with a challenge and suggested solutions as well. It's incredibly welcome, and obviously working closely with Don and channeling the opportunities that we have that you're identifying into the combined authority will continue to be really important as well, and also working closely with Kerry as well for Bristol East. So thank you for that. Let's move on now. We have 2 questions from Councillor Emma Edwards. Would you like to ask your first question?
Thank you, Marvin. And yes, I can say we absolutely are delighted that the train station is opening. So the people of Ashley Down, and we're looking forward to it opening. But yeah, to echo people here, I think integrated, it's when these travel schemes are integrated, they work best. And there is a lot of concern about Concord Way. Obviously, at the moment, it's closed and it is causing a lot of distress to people who use it as a main transport corridor. Train travel and people who cycle and walk tend to be different people because they're going to different destinations. So I'm happy to combine my questions and just say, you say that there's been measures that have been identified to reduce this conflict when you reduce the path to under 3 metres. And if you have identified those measures to reduce the conflict, what is the reasoning why they can't be implemented now rather than waiting for funding for a feasibility study in the future?
Firstly, people who walk and cycle and people who use train stations, they aren't different people by and large. That kind of modal analysis of transport, I think, is a very problematic one. In fact, cyclists will be able to use Ashley Down Station, put their bike on it and take their bike out to another area of the city or beyond the city for a holiday or for a weekend. And equally, you know, some pedestrians or passengers will jump on a bike, a hire bike or something at the station. The problem is, and you'll know this, and I've walked it a number of times, is there is a very large bank along one side of the path for a number of metres. The station, in order to be accessible and to be compliant, and that's something we fully support, does need to take a small section of the path. There's absolutely no way we could or would delay the building of this station because of the loss of a small amount of the path. But meanwhile, we do have to look at a solution. We are doing that for this section of 115 metres. And I'm sure most people will entirely understand why the first station, or it'll be the second after Port Wainwright, the second station to be built in Bristol in nearly a century, only the second station, could conceivably cause a loss of a few centimetres from a cycle path without it being a disaster. And it is a matter of sequencing. We are now looking at the changes we can make to that bank. It is quite expensive. There's some structural things. There's a number of trees and greenery there. And it will need to have a supporting wall, etc., etc. So it's not a quick thing. But we're looking at that now in order to make sure that Concord Way also is the absolute best piece of infrastructure it can be for walkers and cyclists, because we know that it's very heavily used.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, I mean, they are different in the fact that the daily cyclists, you know, they're not going to be taking the train from Bishopston to Fairfield High. They're just not. They cycle and walk that way. So in terms of specifically the children who use Fairfield Way, would you be prepared to work with Fairfield School to look at solutions for the pupils that are currently stuck without that cycle and walking route?
You mean during the work or after the work?
Well, during would mean that we could find a solution before it opens. I'm just concerned that it's going to be narrowed and then afterwards find a solution, rather than considering, like, it's 1,000 cycle journeys a day. This is not a small amount of people that use this cycle lane. This is a lot of people who already are losing it altogether for 2 years.
I'm well aware of the number of people who use that cycle path, and we are working on a solution. It will require structural engineers to deal with the problem of that bank along there, because it will need some supporting, and it has a road above it. But we're well aware of the numbers of people who use that, and it's an important path.
Do you have a second question?
So is that down to cost then, that solution isn't being looked at simultaneously at the same time as the train station is being? Sorry, that answer didn't come out quite clear.
No, it's a matter of sequencing. You can't always do things absolutely simultaneously. There will be some difficult decisions to be made regarding the loss of trees. And I'm glad to hear that you'll be supportive of those, because that bank is covered with trees. But it requires a structural engineering solution. At the moment, you have got some, not to use any technical terms, you've got some mesh bags holding it up there. You have roots of the trees, etc., etc. We will need to obviously provide something else which will impact on the trees along there. I think it may take a little time for us to go through the decisions that need to be made regarding those trees. But I think everything will happen, but you've got to do one thing before the other. You can't just do things in parallel always.
Did you have a supplementary?
That was my supplementary.
Oh, great. Okay, great. I mean, having a look at the site, I think the opening question, when you look at the site, there is a steep bank going up to homes on one side and a railway line on the other. If we are going to support a new train station being there and the platforms being there, there are minimum standards that must be met, and those are not negotiable. Of all the things that can be moved in a finite amount of space with multiple demands on it, the legal requirements around the platform is this thing that can't be moved because the stakes are higher. So the thing that has to give is either, I guess, you dig into the bank, which sounds like a feat of engineering of phenomenal proportions, or you take a piece of the railway path and not try and make a big leaflet kind of campaign. It's about how we use finite space in a constricted city. But then we are into the space of just how we do what we do all the time, is use shared space and make some personal decisions about how we conduct ourselves in those shared spaces as well. But I'm sure we will be, the conversations going on with community groups on how we use that shared space all the time. But if the commitment is there to the station, then the challenges that come with that are just unavoidable. Okay, so any other Cabinet members wish to comment on this item? Nicola.
Thanks, Marvin. Just to really welcome this as well, just echo the comments and just some personal reflections on people often will say that processes in local authorities takes a really long time, but we're like Olympic athletes compared to Network Rail, God bless them, with their gate systems and the length of time that progress takes over years and years. So it's great to see this here today. There's very good reasons why it takes a long time for Network Rail to make those choices and decisions. So it's fantastic news to see it here today, and it feels like it's been a really long time coming. So it's really welcome, and I think it is a moment to celebrate moving the city forward. Absolutely. Thanks, Marvin.
Thank you. If no other Cabinet members are going to speak to this item, let me hand back to you now, Don, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen, but also to just to recognise the leadership you've shown on this and the incredible achievement of getting train stations open up in the city. Don.
Thank you. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Okay, so on to agenda item 9. This is still with you, Don. The Bristol Active Travel Fund Tranche 4 bid.
Thank you. Bristol faces several transport, health and environmental challenges. Our priority is to identify funding for schemes that help reduce congestion, improve health outcomes and contribute to our objective of being net carbon zero by 2030. Walking and cycling initiatives are one of the most effective means of meeting these goals, offering several benefits beyond safer and more reliable transport connections. This paper accepts Bristol's portion of the Active Travel Fund Tranche 4 bid through the West of England Combined Authority to the Department for Transport, which was submitted in February 2023. We're pleased that this has been successful, and now Cabinet needs to formally accept the funding of £2.5 million, which will allow us to begin to build one project and further develop 4 other schemes, which will be important for active travel infrastructure in South and East Bristol. 1.6 million of the funding will be used to deliver the Old City and King Street construction scheme, which will be completed by March 2024, improving connections. The remaining funding to be used to develop the Active Travel Fund for development schemes further. That's Philwood Quiet Way, Deanery Road, Old Market Quiet Way, which hopefully will join up the Bristol and Bath Railway path with the centre of Bristol at last, and Malago Greenway. These will come back to Cabinet for consideration once the development work has been done. The regional bid includes almost £1 million for cycle hangers across the region. It is unclear what the split will be between the local authorities in the region at this stage. I also want to sneak in a plug for 2 other active travel construction projects set to get underway this month at Bristol Bridge and around Cottam Hill. I'd also like to make a plug for Lawrence Weston Road, which in my ward, which is reaching its conclusion now as well. And it's going to look absolutely lovely. Again, one slight gripe. This bid is part of this bid and beg funding model that makes it really difficult to achieve sweeping changes and is behind one of the criticisms of our cycling and walking infrastructure that's very patchy. Well, it is patchy because we keep begging for money to fill in bits of it all the time. But that is the nature of local government funding. And we have been successful in funding these interventions, which are important links in the cycle network and walking as well, that will help the communities and areas outside of the inner suburbs to travel to work and leisure opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. I will say, actually, the point you made about the way the national funding model undermines our ability to plan and roll things out in a coherent, joined-up way was something that came up this weekend, as I said, at the LGA Labour Away Day. And one of the items raised by Labour local government leaders, with prospective parliamentary candidates in the room as well, was that while we don't expect an incoming national Labour government to just open up the floodgates on spending, we've got to be careful about that. What we do want them to do very early doors is begin to look at the nature of the financial relationship between Westminster, Whitehall and local government, so that we can have a much more of a partnership of equals approach, which I think would be an incredible investment in local government's ability to plan for the 5, 10, 15, 20-year horizon that we must do with these kind of major infrastructure projects. Get beyond the electoral cycle as well, as we've tried to do with the One City approach. So I'm sure we're going to get lots of support, but lots of concerns. So let's go to our first public forum statement, which is from Councillor Emma Edwards. So Emma, Tim's going to keep time. You'll have a minute for your statement. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, this is in support. So the Green Group welcome this news, and we're delighted that this funding has been secured to deliver this cycling infrastructure in Bristol. And we're pleased that the administration has listened to us and cycling advocates who have called for improvements to cycle lanes and the need for a joined-up network of lanes in Bristol. The route from Old Market in particular is welcome as it goes towards improving a vital cycling corridor. We look forward to the continuation of creating a joined-up cycling lane network, and we look forward to working to doing that in the committee system in the future as well. However, while the securing of money is to be celebrated, in comparison with other cities, there is far more that could be secured, which is why we hope the administration will be mindful of how existing and developing cycle lanes are developed. In particular, we must ensure that new infrastructure is high quality and meets national standards in the LNT 120 to ensure that we can always bid for funds, the funds for Bristol that they deserve. Improving cycling and walking routes, as this report mentions, is key towards achieving net zero. Sacrificing cycling routes at the expense of other transport schemes is counterproductive. So I hope that you continue to invest in cycling routes and deliver them swiftly. Thank you.
So the first question, we have 3 public forum questions submitted from 2 people. The first question is from Councillor Tim Rippington. Tim?
Thank you, Marvin. Yeah, I make no apologies for dragging us back to Brislington again. But whenever these funding pots come out, I do look to see whether feeder road is included, because it is always raised as an issue with my residents that in the absence of buses or trains, they'd love to cycle into Temple Meads and the centre, but the feeder road is really, really difficult road for them. So I hear what you're saying about funding pots and how difficult it is to get them. So looking at other possible sources of funding, the administration's regeneration of Temple Quarter would undoubtedly bring a sizable sum of Section 106 money into the council. And Don, do you know when plans for how this money could be spent will be drawn up, and will you ensure that any proposals include active travel improvements along Feeder Road? Yeah, I also get a lot of emails about Feeder Road, and I know that the cycling and walking infrastructure down there is not brilliant. Part of the reasons for that is we've known for a number of years that the Temple Quarter development framework is being made up, and it's not just a matter of, yes, there will be money coming from that, but also we want to take an integrated approach to the whole area. It would be a shame to put something along Feeder Road and then to find out it didn't link up with something that's going on over the other side of the river. So please engage with what's going on down at Temple Quarter, as I'm sure you will. And as soon as we hear about money coming from there, we will want to link Feeder Road and Brislington in there. And we'll also be working, I hope, on Spark Evans Bridge fairly soon as we've finished Jail Ferry, or perhaps before, because it does need work, and that's an important active travel link to your ward, which desperately needs work. So it will have to be closed for a while, but if it's not closed for repair, it will be closed. So it's something that we need to do as well. Is that okay, Tim? Yeah.
There was a supplementary, Tim.
No, I'm okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So the next questions are from Councillor Marley Bennett, but I don't see Marley here. Okay, so we can get back to Marley outside of this. Cabinet members. Any other cabinet members wish to comment on this item? Kai.
So just come in. Because obviously people have widely mentioned the transport benefits of this, but also I thought it was good to point out the economic benefit of doing this, especially around the the old city, because obviously we took the decision to pedestrianise that a few years ago. We've got the traffic regulation order in now as well, but the enforcement of that's been done on quite a temporary sort of basis with a bollard and things like that. So this investment will allow that to become a permanent scheme, and obviously there's huge benefits for the hospitality sector and the nighttime economy from doing that, and obviously we can improve the public realm as well with this funding. So it's not just transport benefits, there's also the economic benefit that comes from this paper as well.
Thanks, Kai. If there were no other comments from Cabinet, let me hand back to you, Don, to take the decision, which I support, and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Thanks, Marvin. Yeah, if I could just make one more point, it was that Bristol has received £2,526,204 for its active travel schemes in this tranche, and 915,599 for regional cycle hangar programme. And this is the vast majority of the money that has been given by Active Travel England, granted by Active Travel England to WECA. That's contrary to some things which were put out on social media by the Green Party, which stated that we had such a bad reputation with Active Travel England for the quality of our schemes, that in fact they wouldn't give us very much money. In fact, they gave us the vast majority of what is coming to WECA. And neither should they claim responsibility for pushing us into doing these things. These schemes are planned by us, and we've got every intention of making the best active travel infrastructure in the city that we possibly can with the money available, whether they wish to support it or not. I move now to what Marvin has asked me to do, which is in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. I mean, picking up on your point slightly, I do think there's a lot of credit being claimed for the work in the city, and it is important that, you know, as politicians, our social media activity is actually true. And true not just in a clever configuration of facts to lead people to erroneous conclusions, but true in the way information is put together as well. And it's a real pity when that doesn't happen. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item 10, Residence Parking Scheme Policy Review. Don.
Thank you, Marvin. There are two elements to this paper. A decision to increase the fees to reflect the premium on publicly managed road space. Secondly, we called for review several months ago, and what has become clear is that the impact and effectiveness of resident parking zones lacks the evidence to be effectively measured. So our intention is to gather evidence that lets us better consider the strategic implications of the RPS approach. It's important that the evidence leads our thinking, not prejudices or single issue campaigns or ideology. We need to know, are these working to achieve the outcomes that we want? Residence parking zones have created a lot of debate in the city, but that debate has more heat than light. It's absent of evidence. What we do know is that zones encourage short car journeys within them because they allow people to keep their cars who wouldn't necessarily need to keep a car for rather a cheap cost. We know that the growth of development in the city centre creates pressure on the zones, as well as discriminating between new residents and old, and that traffic levels in the city centre have not been successfully reduced. Our view remains that the best way to reduce the use of private car is reliable, frequent, segregated public transport, alongside the successful introduction of scooters and improved active travel infrastructure. This is why we remain committed to investment in a mass transit system. RPZs are an outdated approach, and our direction of travel now is livable neighbourhoods and building homes in sustainable central locations. The constant call for more RPZs without evidence is moving a problem around without a real solution. Rather than expand the simplistic and outdated RPS, we are working with communities towards livable streets, improving the public realm, enhancing public transport and active travel infrastructure. This commitment to review the structures already in place and to take action to better listen to the needs of communities was clear in the manifesto which saw us re-elected. That process has seen the community design the city's first livable neighbourhoods trial in East Bristol, across Barton Hill, Redfield, and parts of St George. A second scheme is in the early stages of being developed in BS3. So after almost a decade of the zones being in place, it's important we take the opportunity to re-evaluate the role they play. And today we propose some changes to tariff levels. In considering tariff levels, that in some areas of Bristol's wealthiest areas, it costs £112 for a year's parking of a second car. The increase in costs raises additional revenue as well for all road users and still provides cheap parking on public roads. So the changes are to remove the reductions provided to low-emission vehicles, currently free below 100 grams CO2 and half price between 101 and 110 grams CO2, to align with an existing government policy change to remove many of the reductions offered to low-emission vehicles through vehicle excise duty, since parking is about space, not emissions. Doubling the cost of secondary permits from £112 to £224, and raising the cost of third permits from £224 to £560, again, to encourage modal shift. Increasing central parking zone permit fees from £50 to £250 to reflect the premium on space in our city centre. These programmes will be followed later this year by additional potential measures to comprehensively further review the effectiveness of the residence parking zones. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. So we've received 4 public forum statements on this item. The first statement is from Greg Cooper. No, okay. Simon Bull. Okay. Martin Fodor. So Martin, you've got a minute and Tim will be keeping time.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, well, as the members of the public would have said if they'd been here, that people have been seeking support to manage parking in their unsafe and chaotic streets for many years. They have been waiting several years for the policy to move forward. And they've been waiting for several years for the promises of corner protection and dealing with rogue parking for years. But what this report does do is charge more for some vehicles. What it will do is cause displacement of those vehicles to be stored in neighbouring areas immediately if people don't pay the higher fees. So there will be an immediate problem, the knock-on effect of the new charges, because people want to store their vehicles while they have them. We've been trying for several years to engage in policy about residence parking because we know from your colleagues in London it complements low-traffic neighbourhoods, as the leaders of several London boroughs have told us. You manage parking and you develop low-traffic neighbourhoods. But the
okay, Martin, that's a minute.
Yeah,
okay.
The consultation means there will be consequences, there will be displacement, but there's no solution presented here. We don't know what the review might do. I'd love there to be evidence rather than the assertions, but at the moment all we know is there will be knock-on effects without solutions, and people will be worried by that.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for your statement. Next statement is from Ed Plowden. No? Okay. So let's move on to our questions now. We have 2 public forum questions submitted from 2 different people. First, Councillor Steve Pearce, who's told us he's not here. The next question is from Councillor Christine Townsend.
So it's in relation to your low car zone policy, which you brought in August 2018. It's not mentioned anywhere in the paper. So I'm interested to understand what the implementation approach will be, given that you're not consulting on your low car zone policy.
Well, low car zone policy hasn't changed, has it? It hasn't changed.
Okay.
Why should we consult on it?
Okay.
Did you have a supplementary?
Yeah. Can you explain how it is you implement it? Because as a ward representative from a low car zone area, which is RPZ, I'm trying to understand how it's implemented, because it seems to be very ad hoc at the moment.
I think it's an uncomfortable it's an uncomfortable mixture of a planning tool, which is then passed on to parking services. And if you look through the list, which is published on the website of car-free developments, it's surprisingly short, given that in 2018 this was extended to all the RPS areas. There actually aren't many on there. So I think what we can say about it is that it really hasn't been very effective at all as a tool. It was started in 2005. It was extended in 2018, and it isn't working, which is why we propose more radical measures, really, because 2030 is coming up.
Thanks very much, Don. Thank you for your questions and your supplementary. On this item, any other Cabinet members wish to comment? If not, I'm going to hand straight back to Don to take the decision, which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Thanks, Marvin. To return to Councillor Fodor's statement, I don't believe that everyone who has a second or third car, when faced with an increased bill, will just park it down the road somewhere. Many of them will actually decide that this is the time to change mode and move to active travel, and his views are deeply conservative, in my opinion. We need to have more ambition and more belief in human goodness, maybe, or something like that. But I shall conclude as I've been asked to conclude. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Don. And again, it's just to recognise what a challenge this is. Making pronouncements in an abstract is easy, but your pronouncements have to survive contact with the real world, and not everyone's does. But you are grappling with the real world, and we appreciate the progress you've been making on this front. Ironically, I was with the leader of Brighton, the new leader of Brighton, who's inherited an absolute chaos down there, because for all the value statements, the city's in a mess. She's clearing that up. But she'll be up in a few weeks anyway to talk to us. But so agenda item 11, housing revenue account, stock condition surveys. Tom.
Thank you. Stock condition surveys are essential in ensuring we maintain high standards in our housing stock. The information collected from these surveys helps us to forecast, plan and deliver our housing investment plan, making sure we are compliant with a range of legislation and regulations which are being updated all the time. They allow us to report day-to-day repairs and any other issues to the relevant teams in the council, and keep the housing stock updated and supporting tenants' needs. We manage 27,000 units, almost, of social rented accommodation, and the previous programme that was in place prior to COVID aimed to complete approximately 5,000 surveys a year to try and get into a rhythm where we were ensuring that properties are surveyed every 5 years. COVID has had a huge impact on our ability to do this, limitations in accessing the properties, and also been challenges to recruit staff as well into the roles, resulting in a growing backlog and drop performance levels since 2020. However, within our existing teams, a damp and mould task force has now been established, reviewing our approach to tackling damp and mould, reviewing progress and implementing the 26 recommendations of the Housing Ombudsman on this area, and working to ensure that we can take an evidence-based and data-led approach to improving conditions in parts of our housing stock. This paper proposes that we aim to complete stock condition surveys on 80% of our housing stock over a 2-year period. So that's 40% per year to bring the programme back on track. And by inspecting 40% of the stock per year, we can deal with that backlog, improve our data, and ensure that we then know where to identify our efforts to tackle damp and mould within our housing stock. We're also ensuring that all homes are comprehensively surveyed, as visits to carry out responsive repairs on maintenance would not involve whole property inspections, although they may pick up on some issues. We expect the new programme to commence in autumn 2023, and some of the plans include targeting the properties that have either not been surveyed previously or not for an extended period of time. We'll procure an external property consultant firm or firms to undertake the surveys, and this will be structured as a 1+1 contract. So that means we'll be able to evaluate performance after year one and ensure that it's satisfactory before proceeding to year two. Whilst we are doing this, the aim is also to ensure that we do have the internal capacity to do this work going forward and make sure we've got that expertise built in, so that once this external contract to catch up is concluded, we'll be able to carry on with our programme of house condition inspections. This represents an investment of £2 million over the 2 years, so roughly 800k to £1 million a year, and I commend the report to Cabinet.
Thank you, Tom. So we've had no public forum statements on that, but we have had a question. It's from Councillor Brenda Massey. Brenda?
Thank you. I do really welcome the decision to carry out a housing stock survey on council properties. But will consideration be given to adapting as many properties as possible to improve the living conditions for the elderly and disabled, just so they can stay in their current accommodation as long as possible, and also stay within the communities they know?
It's a really important topic you raise. I mean, the first thing just to say is obviously the decision to adapt properties is based on the assessment of needs for that individual carried out by an occupational therapist, and the request for those assessments can be made either via Care Direct for adults and Disabled Children Specialist Services for a child. That said, though, arrangements are going to be made with the provider of the stock service to feedback any concerns identified while inspecting the property, including thinking about accessibility. And, you know, that can include concerns that a resident may need that signposting to have that assessment, so we make sure we get the response to their needs correct. At the moment, we're setting aside significant provision to invest in adaptations. It's currently about £3 million a year, and also £675,000 for repairs and maintenance of those installations as well, because obviously it's not just putting them in, it's how they're performing once they're in. For the 2022-23 year, we completed 558 new major and re-adaptations and 848 minor adaptations within our own stock.
Thanks, Tom. Did you have a supplementary, Brenda?
Not really. It was just a comment on the psychological impact on people if they have to move because they become disabled or something like that. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any Cabinet members wish to comment on this item? Ellie?
Thank you. I really welcome this paper, and it will really help us significantly accelerate our property surveys and identify the actions and the problems found therein. It's also great to see the sustainability of the programmes being thought about and being baked in for the future as well. The health impacts of sustained exposure to damp and mould such as respiratory problems can be really significant, and we've all seen the national heartbreaking stories around this. So it's really reassuring and absolutely right that we are prioritising the well-being of our residents in this way. We know that good quality, safe, affordable houses are vital to a person's ability to thrive, and that's why it's such a huge priority for us. And I'm minded to mention some of the other recent significant work that you've been doing as well, such as the One City Living Rent Commission, which is looking at the affordability of Bristol's private rented sector, and that's a huge cross-sector piece of work. And also the recent paper you brought through on reducing levels of homelessness and rough sleeping, and that support that provides for Bristolians. This is all public health stuff. This is all, making sure that we're looking after the residents really need our support in the city. So thank you to you and the housing team for your work on this.
Thank you, Ellie. If there are no other Cabinet members commenting on this paper, I'm going to hand back to you now, Tom, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Again, thank you for that, Ellie. It's important we're thinking about health and well-being when we're doing the work that we're doing, and so that the other thing this is really going to help us to do is make sure we now know where to target that interventions as we improve the data on our stock. So yeah, thank you. So in terms of decisions to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you all. So on to agenda item 12, Southmead Regeneration. Kai, you have to make your way out for this item. We'll send someone to get you shortly. Make sure you behave when you're outside. All right, Tom, this is with you.
Thank you, bear with me. So finding innovative ways to build housing is a key part of our plans to meet our ambitious affordable homes targets and tackle the housing crisis. And one of the ways we're doing this is by working with local communities to enable them to build the homes that best reflect the needs of the neighbourhood. And a really key example of this approach can be found in Southmead, where we're supporting an ambitious community-led regeneration and housing delivery programme, working with the Arnside and Glencoyne Regeneration Project Group, whose members include Southmead Development Trust, local residents, other local community groups, and local elected councillors Brenda Massey and Kai Dudd. And at this stage, I'm aware there's a few in the public gallery today. I'd just like to pay tribute to you all, the Trust, local residents and elected councillors, for your unrelenting commitment to driving this forward. Not been an easy path, and obviously still some way to go. We are where we are because of your tenacity, constructive challenge and patience in realising the ambitions of a community that's been long overdue for significant investment. We've also made significant progress against the master plan, and some of the things that have already happened include the public realm and sustainable urban drainage improvements to Arnside, which were completed and opened to the public in May 22. We've purchased the Whitehall site for redevelopment, with the former building now demolished, and that will also retain play on that site as well. Planning permission has been granted for the first new major housing scheme, and I know work is happening at the moment to have a new scheme come forward with additional levels of HIF funding made available for the pre-development costs enabling work. The youth centre has also been returned to the council, and local youth services have been consolidated and improved on the Ranch Adventure Playground, as well as relocating the library to Southmead House. The paper itself sets out to accept additional funding to implement key aspects of the scheme and note amendments to the Southmead Master Plan. In particular, it seeks Cabinet approval for an additional SIL funding of £620,000 to deliver the project, the required contribution increasing from the £7 million this administration has already committed through a previous Cabinet meeting in February 2021. The revision represents the cost of covering the relocation of the library and the funding gap that has emerged from Aldi's decision not to progress with the expansion of their store. After amendments, this development aims to provide up to 187 homes, of which approximately 66% will be affordable. It will also deliver a new shared library, advice and learning hub, community enterprise space and a health and wellbeing hub, which will complement existing health provision in the area. We have a vision to create vibrant communities with sustainable, inclusive economic growth. The transformation of Southmead, including the provision of new homes, an improved town centre and a healthy and inclusive local community, will contribute to citywide targets for housing and for developing economic and social opportunity and environmental sustainability. I commend this report to Cabinet.
Thank you, Tom. And I just echo the thanks that you have given out to those people from the community that have been so central to driving forward this regeneration work. We have one public forum statement, and that's from Deanna Perry. Deanna? Oh, Dina, sorry. Dina, so you have a minute, but we'll stretch it. It's okay.
Okay. From the launch of our community plan in 2015 and housing needs study done the following year, it has become clear that the regeneration of Arnside and Glencoyne Square is vital for Southmead. Our group of residents, councillors and stakeholders have been meeting monthly for over 6 years now, with the sole aim of making a better future for Southmead. Cabinet approval today would be a massive step forwards for our regeneration project. As a lifelong resident, I can honestly say that Arnside is the heart of Southmead, and for this development to be built is a dream that I hold very close to my heart. Thank you.
Thank you. And when we are in Cabinet, there's a lot of process that goes through, and all that's really important. But it's a real honour to be able to share the moment with you in many ways, and watch you stand up and speak from the heart about what's going to be transformative and so important to the community as well. So thank you for being here today. Any other Cabinet member wish to comment on this item? Asha.
I just wanted to say, so Yeah, it's kind of very dear to my heart. I'm visiting Southmead regularly at the moment because, as you know, my sister lives in the ward, and I was around when you finally kind of got the plan approved, and I was really excited about what's going to happen and how it's going to kind of transform what you have said is the heart of Southmead. I have lots of fond memories as a young child going to Southmead during my school holidays and staying there. So I know all of the work that you and the volunteers have put in will pay off dividends. So I'm excited. I can't wait to see the transformation take place. And congrats. That's right, I did. So well done to you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look, in the absence of any other Cabinet member comments, let me hand back to you now, Tom, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
So you got your decision, Dina. Okay, so let's go on to agenda item 13. And I'm bringing this item, and this is refurbishment works to existing New Cut River bridges and future feasibility studies to manage other assets. So Bristol has 45 walkable bridges that span our main waterways, and I've just discovered today that you can take on a 25-mile walk to actually get across all of those bridges if you so wished. Whether it's to marvel at the views across Clifton Suspension Bridge or to cross the harbour, they're an indispensable part, of our city. But over the years, many of these bridges have been neglected, and we did, as we've shared a number of times, inherit a legacy of underinvestment in some of the city's fundamental infrastructure that goes often underappreciated until it's no longer available. And it's been our job since coming in to identify those underinvested bits of infrastructure, including our bridges, and to put that right. So we've secured £16 million from the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, which is administered by the West of England Combined Authority, to invest in our vital infrastructure. So work is well underway with the restoration of the first bridge in the series, and that's Gel Ferry Bridge. The final two sections of the Footbridge are being repaired and painted by our contractor, Griffith, before we reopen it in the coming months. Once these repairs are complete, we will start work on the next bridge in the programme, Sparks-Evans Bridge. We have moved this to the top of our list, as our inspections have shown. It is in urgent need of structural repairs and already began feasibility and inspection work on the bridge. Then we will move on to Vauxhall Bridge, then Langton Street Bridge, which is also known as the Banana Bridge, the twin bridges of Bedminster Bridge, and then Bath Bridge. And Cabinet will be asked to agree an investment to invest a total of £1 million on condition assessments, plans of work, and costing proposals for two other structures. That's the New Brislington Bridge and St Philip's Causeway. We know that these important structures are key to our city, and the works to repair them can cause significant inconvenience. However, I know most people will agree and understand that letting them deteriorate and putting off the difficult decisions of bringing them up to standard is not an acceptable way forward. And this programme will ensure their sustainability for decades to come. So on this report, we have received one public forum statement, and the statement is from the Disability Equalities Director for Bristol Ferry, David Regwell. Dave.
Yeah, so we support this. We support these proposals and the bridges, but there is the issue of these bridges being made fully accessible. I think that's the most important thing to us. Not every pontoon in the city is fully accessible for the ferries. I know that you went on one the other day. We did have one disabled accessible ferry. We haven't now. But if we're going to do this properly, and I welcome the money that's come in from the Dan Norris and the Combined Authority for this project, and making the city's bridges safe, and particularly linking up into the harbour and therefore into the ferry services and into MetroBus. But we would like to just be reassured that all these bridges are going to be fully accessible for disabled people, so that anybody with mobility impairments, wheelchair users, mothers and fathers with buggies, etc., that all these bridges will be worked on by WECA and by Bristol City Council in partnership will be made fully accessible. That's our main point of concern, because it's no good having an accessible transport system if we can't join it in the point you made, Don, about integrated transport. Then the network needs to be fully integrated, including the bridges. So that's the point. And we'd also ask that when these bridges are being upgraded, that you also look at sustainable transport options on them, such as walking and cycling, and where possible bus priority. But we want to make sure
Dave.
access to the ferry network in the harbour via these bridges is fully accessible. And also we're looking to have the landing stages and the ferries made accessible as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. I'm going to share something with you in a minute. I've just seen the way that this planned investment programme on our bridges that we've identified and must happen in a planned way is being talked about. But I'll share that with you shortly, because it's just kind of a classic example of a city making responsible decisions and someone trying to generate clicks to sell advertising on their platform. But don't worry about it. We'll get there just shortly. It's an embarrassment to the profession. But turning to questions, we've had 6 public forum questions submitted between 3 people. The first 2 questions are from Hayden Gill. No? Okay. No, Hayden. The next 2 questions are actually from you, Dave, from Disability Equalities Forum. So can I invite you to ask your first question?
I think it's just the reassurance we need that these bridges will be made fully accessible for people with mobility problems and reduced mobility is the correct title. And also, obviously, people can walk and cycle and use them as well. So I think will the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority and Bristol City Council, 2 authorities involved, public bodies, make sure there's full equality impact assessments carried out on these projects? I think that's all we're asking for.
Yeah, they will be, Dave. And again, it's what I would say is we are committed to it, but we always welcome your challenge to make sure that when we think about transport, it is fully accessible. It's actually, just on another point, it's one of the reasons why when people always talk about cycling and walking, we don't think active travel is simply about cycling and walking. There are people who can't cycle and can't walk, and they're often forgotten in the language, which is actually significant. But they will be, along with the normal project management consultation, with our network management colleagues and the other stakeholders, as well. So we do have those equalities commissions that we've set up, and we expect to be working with them on to making sure that what we do delivers a city that's inclusive as it needs to be. And let me just share this now with you, Dave. Actually, so what I've just described is a review of the city's bridges, 45 bridges we have in Bristol across our waterways. So we've reviewed our city's bridges, and we've found that along with so much of the rest of the city infrastructure, they're coming to end of life. It's like buying a fleet of cars and finding out that they all need their cam belts changed, right? That's what we inherited. So we put a plan in place. We bid for the money, and we put a plan in place to sequentially go through those bridges to understand the scale of challenge they face, and to put in sequence how we would repair those bridges to make sure that they're equipped for decades to come. It has to happen. The headline, Chaos Crossing Bristol as 7 more bridges need repairs, makes it sound like there's just some kind of chaos springing out of the, this is just embarrassing. And accuracy, this is what we mean by about truth and accuracy. Commuters face years of chaos. Talk about trying to create more heat than light in a situation. It's just remarkable. In many ways, we give up on trying to get a top quality commentary on the complexities and challenges of running a modern core city. But and that's why we have to use our own communications channels, because it's the only way of getting accuracy out into the public realm and making sure that people understand what it actually is that we're working with an older, constrained city with a growing population facing the climate and ecological emergency. But, we can but wish we'd get some quality in the minute taking around the city and how it's reported. But let's go on to your second question, Dave.
My second question.
I had two from you, but it's okay if you only had one.
No, I think, so again, it goes back to the access. It goes back, I suppose, to make the point again, to the historic harbour. It's one of the oldest harbours in the southwest. It's had no money spent on it for years. It now needs renovation and restoration by the West of England Combined Authority and Bristol as the Port Authority. And I think we just need to make sure that all these bridges and ways of accessing the harbour's still not fully accessible either. As I said, the pontoons, Temple Meads, we can't even get onto we put the bridge right, but we can't get into the actual ferry because the pontoon's not accessible. So we just want to make sure that really, as we go forward on this with the two authorities, the city and the West of England Combined Authority, that we make this as accessible as possible. And obviously, I'm sure the works will be carried out. I suppose that's the other reassurance, is that as we go along, we'll have diversity routes for able-bodied people as well as disabled people, and we manage it in the way we've been managing the Bedminster Bridge project. But I think we just want to make sure that it's fully accessible. I know the Older People's Forum are concerned as well about making sure there's full access and easy access to the network. But it is a historic city.
The challenge is accepted, Dave, and actually, I think, particularly when we're looking at the harbour side as well, when we look at the regeneration that's going to happen down there, Baltic Wharf, the opportunity to redevelop Western Harbour as well, those areas, when the regeneration comes through, will be done with an aim to actually, we have been explicit about bringing the waterfront in Bristol back into accessibility, whether people are disabled by the systems around them, or whether we're talking about social exclusion from parts of the city as well. We want to make sure that those areas are accessible to the whole of the city. So along with the bridges, it certainly is at the forefront of our thinking. But I really appreciate your question. Did you have a supplementary to that second question?
I think our supplementary is therefore is in terms of planning of Harbourside and Temple Quarter, I should say.
Yeah.
The bridges and the restoration of the bridges will also take account then of the need to make those areas fully accessible, so that we've got complete accessibility to the harbour and the regeneration areas. I think.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be some sensitivity about us pointing out the weakness in some of the commentary on the city, but maybe in the name of accuracy, we could maybe invite you to write something about the importance of investing in the city's ageing infrastructure. And I can put it on my blog, and
we'd be very happy to do that.
Let's get a voice of a
the scale of the investment in the harbour and the new cut and around Temple Quarter is something that needs massive investment. We've only got that because the government's given us the money through the West of England Combined Authority to progress with this. Bristol's the Highway Authority and the Port Authority. So we welcome it very much.
So we'll get a few words from you on the importance of investing in our infrastructure, and in an orderly way as we have, and hopefully people can understand what's actually happening in the city. So the next two questions are from Councillor Patrick McAllister. Is he here? Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, let me just say I'm really thrilled to see the city spending money on these essential repairs. We all know reliable and safe access across the waterways, but also the new cut, which I help represent, is fundamental. We do never realise how essential it is until it disappears, as we've seen with Jail Ferry Bridge over the last several months. In the report under evidence-based point 4, we see £11.5 million of capital funding allocated to the maintenance of 4 bridges, Langton Street, Vauxhall, Bedminster, Newbridge and Bath Newbridge. Can we please see a breakdown of how this money is expected to be apportioned between these bridges, which of them will be prioritised for maintenance first, and how long repairs on each are roughly expected to take? And if that information isn't immediately available, is it possible to know when it will be? Thank you.
Yeah, we have an early indication of that. and we'd be happy to share it with you, because obviously, as I've just read out the sequence of bridges as they're going to be tackled, the planning's being done. The breakdown of costs are actually indicated in the paper, as well. So I'm sure we'll point you to the page. The costs are estimated at the moment based on statutory cyclical inspections, as well as commissioned structural reports undertaken by our strategic partners. So the comments on the paper give an indicative breakdown, but this is an early stage, and we just want to put some caveats in around it being an early stage. So the programme and the whole programme and the duration will be determined by several factors once it starts, worth me adding, such as the capacity of the network at each location, other planned works, and ultimately asset depreciation condition. So we can share all that with you. Just by way of additional information for you, we expect the programme to run over 5 years.
Thank you. Second question, if that's all right.
Sure, jump in, please.
Thanks. So the Bedminster and Bath New bridges are significantly larger than the other bridges that are listed. They both are vehicle bearing, they act as roundabouts as opposed to being pedestrian only. Just wondering why we've got the funding being sought for the new bridges in the roundabout configurations, but not of the older two. So I'm just wondering why the funding's not being sought for repairing the other bridges in those pairs.
Well, it's obviously in scope for us. The Bath Road bridges and Bedminster Road bridges, in terms of their prioritisation, will be determined by the structural condition of those separate 4 bridges. And the roundabout configuration, the location of it, which is obviously a consideration as well from in terms of transport offering, won't actually have an impact on those structural perspectives. But we will consider the wider impact on the transport network as we understand that the works are actually required. So where there is going to be an impact on the wider transport system from those bridges, we'll obviously work to minimise and mitigate that impact. Did you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you. Given just how much larger the bridges are, I suppose, and the difference in purpose and the need to mitigate traffic disruption as well, how confident are we that the allocated money will be sufficient to fund the repair works to these, considering we also need to repair the other 2 footbridges from the same pot, and we all know how those costs can spiral, as we've seen with Jail Ferry Bridge?
Well, the truth is, we're not being overwhelmed with support for the infrastructure challenges that we face, as a city. It's a challenge for cities all across the country, particularly those with harbours around them and harbour walls and bridges that have to take care of, that national government are often, out of sorts. And there is always a risk that we will find challenges that are significantly greater than we anticipated in the first instance. So what I can say is the aim of the paper at the moment is to have an early sense of how much these repairs are going to cost. The act of sequencing the bridges as well means that we get jobs finished, so those bridges remain open. And if we discover that more investment is needed, then that's a conversation for us to have with the combined authority and obviously with national government.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, any other Cabinet members wish to comment on this item? Don.
Yeah, thank you. This is the equivalent really of Tom's stock survey. So it gives me in transport an idea of our bridges, what they need, and also the walls of New Cut, which visibly are in trouble in places. So we now have a picture of what the problem is. We've got the data effectively, and we also now have a rough programme, given that there are lots of high-risk things there. As with Jail Ferry Bridge, many of these structures, we do not know how long they will take to fix often until we actually open them up, because we just cannot see from the outside what the nature of the degradation of the structure is. And so, you know, requests for a tight programme are not just about us doing our sums correctly. They simply cannot be given because we do not have the visibility of the nature of the problem until we open it up. And that's something that, you know, I learnt to my pain with Gelferry Bridge, but to be honest, it's something that engineers who are dealing with such structures always know, is that one problem may, remedying one problem may precipitate another. The one structure that's not on here is Brunel Way Bridge. And it's useful that Councillor McAllister's here because Western Harbour is coming to Cabinet next month. And from the point of view of transport, I do want to say we will have data fairly soon on the expected lifetime of that bridge. But one of the drivers of the Western Harbour project for me is that bridge has a limited lifetime. And we need a plan either to replace it at a massive cost, along with the very aged road layout down there, which I don't think anyone is entirely happy with, or we need to look at reutilising some of that land and having a different bridge, a different layout, different way of crossing the river. But we do need that. We don't have an endless timeline to discuss that or play politics. There will come a point where it simply has to be done. But thank you for the chance to give my comments. Marvin.
No, thank you, Don. It was a £40 million bill that we were facing for that bridge.
That was a few years ago.
Contraption, yeah, it's considerably more now. So the question is, do we seek to spend 40 million, keeping everything as it is, or do we use that 40 million in part to unlock, an area of huge potential for homes, for flood defence, for accessibility, as well as put in, homes in an active travel zone, actually, it's important to say, on brownfield sites. But also put in lives into the middle of the city to support our city centre retail entertainment offering as well, when we know that's under considerable pressure. So look, unless there are any other cabinet comments here, I'm going to take the decision. I don't have to say I will take the decision, which I support, because I'm taking the decision. So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Okay, this is with me as well. Agenda item 14, Kingsweston Lane Footbridge. Now, we had to close the footbridge in 2015 following it being hit by a lorry when the bridge became unstable and unsafe. And we do know how frustrated people have been that it had to be closed, but it had to be closed for safety reasons. So we do need to thank people who have campaigned, those who have worked hard behind the scenes, including Don and Darren Jones, the local MP, who've worked hard with us to get this Grade 2 listed bridge on track to being reopened. So we reached agreement with Historic England and eventually received planning permission to reinstall the bridge in a raised position to prevent any future collisions. The concern was putting it back where it was, having spent money on it, it would be hit again. So raising it makes our investment safer. The statements today will highlight why this has been a challenge. But given this is not a strategically significant route, even though it is loved by people in the area, we believe we've found the best possible outcome given the very challenging circumstances. So we recognise what we had here is a Grade 2 listed bridge that Heritage England didn't want modified. But in line with the earlier paper, one that we'd wanted to modify with a ramp for disabled access. Unfortunately, the ramp was not acceptable to Heritage England and also was prohibitively, expensive. And that led to, a period of time when the project was held up. So the choice we ended up facing was to continue in that hold up with no bridge or to compromise and get a bridge. And the compromise does mean that there is no ramp. And we have to acknowledge, and I want to, as Dave's here as well, to acknowledge that there is a consequence for that, but it was the only way we could get this project completed. These recommendations allow us to start the project to dismantle the bridge and repair it off-site and reinstate it at that raised height using money from our Highway Infrastructure Bridge Investment Fund. So on this report, we've received 2 public forum statements, and the first is from Bristol Disability Equalities Forum, Dave Redgewell. Dave.
Yeah, it's coming from Gordon Richardson, but we are concerned because we've discussed it with the Minister, and in fact it was discussed yesterday at the regional transport conference in Birmingham. The Minister made it clear that he wanted to see all structures where the Department of Transport's involved made fully accessible. And that is in the government's mobility plan and in the government's plan by the Department of Transport. So any infrastructure the DFT are involved with or involves roads and highways should be made fully accessible. So I think this bridge is being taken away for 2 years, I understand, for restoration and to be rebuilt. And during that period, I would just ask, on behalf of the Disability Equality Forum, that we have further discussions with Heritage England. I don't think it's unreasonable, and with the Department for Transport, and we see whether there is solutions, because we've seen Worcester Council, and Worcester Council, we had a rail bridge in Worcester, were a similar situation, where they kept saying no, and this thing's heritage. And eventually they came round and said, yes, we'll find a solution. So that's all we're really asking. There's 2 years, and we've got 2 years to look for solutions. Maybe the Combined Authority has a bit more money to help us with the disabled access. It's an important strategic route across North Bristol and down towards the coast.
Thanks, Dave. So that was a statement. I'll say something on the end. And the next statement is from Councillor John Geeta. James Scott. New names. Okay. Then we've had 2 questions. Those are from the Disabilities Equalities Forum. Dave, would you like to ask your first question?
I think the point we've made is that we're really looking for a solution rather than something where we can't have access for disabled people. We're not even being offered an alternative crossing across the road. So there isn't an alternative route being provided for mobility impairments. So if we can't use the bridge, we should at least cross the road safely, and that has not been offered either by the Highway and Transport Authority.
Can I just decipher a question in there? So is it?
So the question is, can we re-look at the accessibility? And I suppose the question is, we've got 2 years, can we at least have the conversations with the government bodies that we think have been given direction by government to not put the decision they put to Bristol City Council? In fact,
we can.
No, they have.
Dave, I would say we can. Because this is progressing, it doesn't mean the end of the conversation. We'll still be talking, and actually, often we are negotiating with national bodies. Again, it is perfectly possible for you to negotiate and make your point with them directly as well. If we're all talking together because we're on the same side, we want a city that's fit for purpose, accessible, and all the rest of it. But Don, did you want to come in here?
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, I'm obviously both Transport Cabinet member, but one of the local councillors as well. This bridge is much loved. It's been struck many times over years. It's a very long story. This goes back decades. And so it's really important to me that this solution that we have found is a long-term one. It raises it to a level where no truck passing by, for whatever reason, it happened last time, the truck driver didn't even stop. It's cast iron, so it does snap. Nobody saw it. There was no insurance available from that accident. But we're now putting the bridge above harm's way permanently. And I think that is a major step forward for this piece of infrastructure. Obviously, I regret the losses of accessibility and stuff, but that could have been solved with ramps, but it was the ramps that actually were considered to be unacceptable by heritage people, and I didn't agree with that, and then it was held up a further 2 years while further discussions went on. But we are where we are now, and I'm delighted that is coming through Cabinet today. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary, Dave, on this question?
In view of what Don said, and Don, I think we're on the same side, I think, could we not just, if Heritage England is doing this, then I think it's appropriate that we ask one of our local MPs in the form of Mark Harper to intervene to make sure they understand the need to make infrastructure. The Department for Transport wants it accessible. The ministers want it accessible. We want it accessible. There's a couple of government agencies here trying to prevent that. I do think we need a conversation with, as you said, Mayor, with central government and with their agencies for some guidance.
I'm going to take a question. Can we do that?
Can we talk to the...
I don't think it would be any harm, Don, at all, is it? Because the work is going on the actual physical bridge now, but we can certainly...
Yes, I won't commit to delaying the work at all. But this is a planning matter, and I'd suggest you have a discussion with our conservation officers.
Let's set that up then, to open up those channels. Keep them going. Thank you very much, Dave. That was a supplementary to the first. I've got here that you had a second question. I don't want to cheat you out of a question. I know. Okay, no problem.
So I think we're trying to make, this is a point that's been passed to me by both South Gloucestershire and North Somerset, is they're trying to create a heritage route through there, through the Froome Valley, coming across from Filton, going through Shirehampton, and therefore over the bridge, and then fully accessible down the coast. And they're putting in bridges along the coast to make this pathway a fully accessible path as part of...
Is there a question?
So the question is, if we're creating this asset of a fully accessible path, then we need to make sure, I suppose, that the bridges that we're using to cross it are fully accessible, whether we can do it via the bridge or whether we have to do it via making some arrangements across Kingsweston Lane.
Okay.
Put that question to the council.
Thank you very much, Dave. Really appreciate your contribution today. Any other Cabinet members wish to comment on this item? No? The number of years I went underneath that bridge when I was getting the number 23 bus home. Used to park outside Armory Square and go all the way to Longcross, which was great. And I always wondered about it, and it was only, I think about 7-8 years ago that I first walked across it. It's like this mysterious bridge that I would see and never got to go across it. So it's going to be fantastic when it's, opened again, subject obviously to some of the issues Dave has raised. So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Don, this is with you now. Agenda item 15, commuted sums policy.
Thanks, Marvin. This isn't going to be the most riveting paper of today, but I'm sure you'll understand why getting our finances in order in transport is very important so that we can deliver more for people. And I know that is important to residents of the city. This policy paper is about gaining financial contributions from developers and builders towards supporting the future maintenance of a highway asset to be adopted. As the Highways Authority, we have legal responsibility for the maintenance and management of adopted highways. We manage and maintain over 750 miles of roads across the network. It's a pretty expansive network that requires constant monitoring and maintenance, and 1,589 structures as well, if anyone's interested. As well as highway surfacing, this responsibility also includes the structure and fabric of the highway. It can bring large liabilities for us, and as colleagues will know, we work in a challenging financial environment with a small, hard-pressed team. We have collected commuted sums for several years, but discussions have taken place with developers at different stages of the process. The policy has benchmarked us against other authorities to develop their approach. The purpose of this new policy is to provide a means of identifying which assets are defined as standard and as such will not attract commuted sums, and which assets are classed as enhanced or non-standard and will generate a requirement for commuted sum payment for future maintenance. The paper sets out an example of materials, cost and contributions, but this only scratches the highway surfacing, if you'll pardon the pun. The policy explains that there is no one-size-fits-all approach, but this new policy will allow for greater innovation and a more varied palette of materials while protecting the council from unknown costs and liabilities. That's it. And there are no, I mean, there are no questions to allow me to expand upon it, which I'd like to, unfortunately.
Oh, well, maybe one of your fellow cabinet members will give you that gift. Oh, okay. Thanks, Don. We often make a reference to Craig, isn't it? Hard yards done in the quiet behind the scenes that go underappreciated, but this is certainly in there. So thank you for your work here. Let me hand back to you now to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I missed Tom. Sorry, Tom.
Just a couple of things. One, to I really welcome this policy. I think also what this does is makes things a bit clearer up front as well for developers, including our own council housing and Gorham Homes, for some of the things that they may need to be thinking about and budgeting for as part of development. So I think, I really welcome the additional clarity this is going to bring. And secondly, you said you had some more things you wanted to say. I'd really love to hear about that.
Well, it follows on from the point you were just making there, Tom, actually. Is that actually by giving certainty to developers, as it says, it allows them to enhance their palette. We're talking about, public realm and quality of public realm by setting a baseline here of, this is the money we need from, this is what basic looks like, and we'll maintain it. If you want to do something fancier, we need a contribution to the maintenance because it's going to cost more to maintain it over the years. So we give a level of certainty to developers, which means that they're probably going to feel more ambitious in the long run, and they won't need to have this backwards and forwards discussions. We can clear this all up, and it includes signals, lighting, other such things like that, all of which need maintenance over the years, and help our financial planning as well. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Thank you for that intervention, Tom. In terms of decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Don, and thank you, Tom. Items 16, 17 and 18 were taken earlier in the meeting with Asher, so hence we're jumping to 19 now. Home Improvement Agency contract extension. Helen.
I'm going to give you the short version of the presentation of the report. This is just one of those tidying up reports. So it's about extending the contract that we have with our Home Improvement Agency, which is We Care, for a year so that we can do a comprehensive recommissioning in 24-25. And without prejudging the outcome of that commissioning that we're going to do in the future, I think that it's broadly accepted that We Care is a very good commissioned service. We get some very, very positive reports back from families who need adaptation, sometimes very quickly if somebody's coming back from hospital. And certainly if you haven't ever been, their showroom on West Street where different aids and adaptations, bathrooms and so on, it's a real eye-opener to go there, and the support of the staff there is excellent, their knowledge of the items that they've got and that they can recommend. So it's just rolling that contract forward. So although it's a lot of money, there's certainly a huge amount of value in that contract.
Thank you very much, Helen. No public forum statements and no questions. Any other cabinet members wish to comment? If not, let me hand back to you now, Helen, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
So in terms of the decision to be taken today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you. On to agenda item 20, electricity sleeving and supply extensions. Kai.
Thank you, Marvin. This report seeks approval to extend the electricity sleeving and supply contracts for up to 18 months, whilst development work takes place to set up the previously approved sleeved pool supply mechanism that we're working on with City Leap. The current sleeving arrangement uses the council's own renewable generation assets, our wind turbines and solar farms, to meet around 1/3 of our current energy demand using low-cost, zero-carbon electricity. This arrangement has saved an estimated 2,021 tonnes of CO2 emissions since August 22, compared with a conventional supply, national grid supply contract. The Kingsweston free electricity supply contracts, a sleeving arrangement for the large sites, a conventional supply conventional supply contracts for smaller sites and street lighting. These are provided through the Laser Public Sector Buying Organisation, and all of these contracts end by September this year. The intention had been that these contracts would be replaced by a wider Bristol City Council developed sleeving arrangement, but the technical and commercial details of that are still to be worked out, and it won't be ready in time before these contracts expired. So there's a need to maintain the electricity supply contracts to council sites. So it's proposed to extend the current sleeving arrangement with Laser by a further 12 months in anticipation of the sleeve pool coming online from October 24. This extension will see some improvements to the current arrangement and the possibility of adding additional generation to the mix. And it also has a 6-month contingency just in case that doesn't happen. And the smaller sites and street lighting contract elements to this would be extended by 18 months in the expectation that the sleeve pool will initially not have sufficient generation to meet that demand, but we expect that demand to come through by April 25. Thank you.
Thank you, Kai. No public forum statements and no questions from Liz. Any Cabinet members wish to comment? Nicola?
Thanks, Marvin. No doubt, as you can probably imagine, Kai, I think this is a great piece of work, and it has not been easy at all to get these things moving in the current market. I just want to make the really obvious observation, but sometimes when technical reports come through, it can be difficult to decipher, that the best piece of resilience we can bring to our city is that we're in control of our energy generation and supply. So we have a closed loop system in the city, and that is essentially what sleeving is doing. And I think we've just got to maintain our commitment to it, which I know we are, and really ramp up that generation across the city and make sure we can power our buildings at a low carbon, carbon-free, low-cost option. It is one of the best interventions we can bring. We have the skills in the city, and we have the generation capacity, and we have the need. And so I think it's a brilliant incentive. I know it's been really difficult, and I think we've just got to keep going with it and really push the amount of sleeved energy that we can pull into the city in the next 5 years. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Let me hand back to you now, Kai, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Thank you, Marvin. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thanks, Kai. So agenda item 21, increase in littering, fixed penalty notice rate and household duty of care.
Thank you. I think this is the last one, isn't it? The report seeks to increase the full fixed penalty notice rate for littering to £150 from the current rate of £100. This is the maximum permitted under the legislation, and also will increase the early payment rate from £50 to £75. The other thing we're doing with this paper is increasing the fixed penalty notice for the household duty of care, which is going up from £200 to £400, which is also the maximum permitted under the legislation. These rates haven't been reviewed since 2019, so that's why we're doing it now. People may be less familiar with the household duty of care requirement, but this requires households to take all reasonable measures available to them in the circumstances to ensure that they only transfer household waste produced on their property to an authorised person. So this reduces the chances of waste ending up in the hands of cowboy companies that, take 20 quid off of you then dump it. And people can check if a company does have the right permits via the Environment Agency if they're not too sure about it. This administration has made a clear pledge that Bristol will be measurably cleaner, and a Clean Streets plan which underpins this pledge, is designed to change behaviour in Bristol to reduce littering, dog fouling, fly tipping, graffiti and other environmental crimes. Part of this is sending a clear message about expected behaviour, cleaning the city and delivering a robust approach to enforcement. Although the cleanliness of the city has improved in many parts, as measured by our independent local environmental quality scoring, more work still needs to be done, particularly in relation to behaviour change. Since 2017, we've issued 30,000 fixed penalty notice and 2,500 people have been taken to court for non-payment since that date. Just want to make clear, any excess funds generated from this are used for environmental improvements in line with the Clean Streets strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kai. So, no public forum statements. We did have 4 public forum questions submitted by 3 people. The first was Susan Aldry, but I don't see her in there. No one in the gallery. The next question is from Councillor Martin Fodor. Martin.
Yes, thank you. Well, my question and Steve Pearce's are the same, actually. His question. What surplus has been retained since 2017 and how has it been spent? Can you say?
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, the surplus that has been retained since 2017 is £221,608. And according to the DEFRA regulations, that has to be used on matters related to littering and environmental issues. So what we've spent the money on, and issues like keeping the highways clean, removing fly posting, that kind of thing. What we've spent the money on, I'll just come to it in a minute, and I can give you a much more detailed answer. So yeah, what we've spent the money on is anti-littering and fly tipping communication campaigns, signage, equipment to community groups that run litter picks, graffiti removal kits, paint, and we've also used the funds to support additional enforcement as well. Thank you. Yeah. I can give you a much more detailed breakdown if you
could
require
that. You could send that. Thank you. That was very helpful.
Did you have a supplementary?
Not on that one. No,
all right,
thank
a
you.
second question.
Yeah, and so you referred in when you presented the report on the goal to have measurably cleaner streets, and you said, you know, some are, but some aren't according to the measuring. Can we see which areas are still below standard and which have met the standard now?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, it's quite a detailed set of information and data, so I'm quite happy to share that outside of this meeting to you. We do use a company called Tetra Tech who conduct these surveys as an independent body to measure how we're doing, and they basically select a cross section of different types of streets and different land types. So, is it commercial land? Is it residential land? Is it industrial land? And also different types of roads. Is it a main road? Is it a residential street? And 3 times a year, they look at a cross-section of about 300 different streets, and they measure the amount of litter, detritus, fly tipping, fly posting. So it's kind of a snapshot, really, and it's probably our best guess at how we're doing in terms of the standards. And in most areas, they have improved. We could do, I think we could do with more action on graffiti, actually, because that hasn't improved as much as littering and detritus. And also, we do use it as a management tool where there might be an area that does come up as below standard. So, for example, recently Hillfields has come up as an area that needed improvement. So we used the information to then send additional resources to the area to make that improvement, so we can use it as a management tool as well.
Do you have a supplementary?
No, that's great. Some more information you can send separately, but that was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That's the end of that item. So let me hand back to you. Oh, sorry. Any Cabinet members? No. Kai. So in absence of any comment here, Well, actually, make one comment. This is, I'm pleased about the fines increasing. You know, I walked across College Green with my boy the other day, and just the number of piles of picnic bottles, Christmas wrappers that people had just got up, walked away, and left. It's just beyond belief. And I said to my 12-year-old, I don't know how people can do it. Just leave a pile of rubbish there, and you've enjoyed a public space. That public space is enjoyable because when you got there, it looked like a lovely piece of grass with people picnicking, and you leave it a place that people would not want to hang around because it feels filthy, dirty, and violated. So we have, haven't we, since the beginning, talked about how we can have an approach that where we need to go out and we need to do better at cleaning up Bristol as a city, but that cannot be done without the city. We could spend tens of millions clearing up waste after people, but we need a two approach. We need to collect it better, we need to put the services in place, but we need people to treat Bristol differently. And if we do that, then we'll get closer to having the quality of city that many of us would want to live in terms of its cleanliness. All right, let me hand back to you now, to Kai, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Yeah, thanks for that, Marvin, sorry. And I know a lot of backbench councillors and ward councillors, you know, this is probably a big issue that comes into their inbox all the time, fly tipping, littering. So I think this move to put all the fines up to the maximum should be appreciated across the chamber, really. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you, Kai. So papers 21 to 26 have already been taken, hence they're not coming now. That's the end of today's Cabinet meeting. Thank you for attending. Next dates, the date of next Cabinet is the 4th of July, 2023. All right, thank you very much.